to another episode of Everything Aaron, the podcast where I'll be discussing politics, publishing, and pop culture. The purpose of this podcast is to awaken truth, transmute pain into power, continue educating and honoring ourselves as a Black women, and constantly reminding ourselves that we really are everything. My name is Erin Ashley Tanner. I'm a mother, an author, a four-time college graduate, and a proud card-carrying member of the 92%. I am a fiery, opinionated Sagittarius with a thirst for knowledge, an unquenchable love for the arts, justice, and the right brand of tea, literally and figuratively. So let's get right into it. Today's episode is entitled, Publishing is Racist Too. Now, I know you may be like, Erin, wait a minute. You're just writing a book. Publishing can't be racist. Not everything in the world has to do with racism. And to those sentiments, I would tell you that you are a lie. A damn lie at that. So let's start with a little bit of history before I get into how I became a part of the publishing world, my current journey, and all the fuck shit that Black authors have to deal with while they're seeking publication. So some of the first Black writers were part of the anti-slavery abolitionist movement. Some of these people you may not have heard of, some of them you may have. First one I want to mention is Jupiter Hammond. He was born in 1711. He was an enslaved man on Long Island, and believe it or not, he is considered the first published Black poet in America. He wrote a poem called An Evening Thought, Salvation by Christ with Penitential Cries. That was published in 1761. Mr. Hammond died in 1806. Now, one you may have heard of that most people have is Phillis Wheatley. She was born in 1753 in West Africa, and she was enslaved in Boston. And Phillis became the first Black woman to publish a book of poetry. Her poems on various subjects, religion and moral, was published in London in about 1773. And Phillis also had to deal with fuck shit. Do you believe that she was examined by a panel of so-called prominent white men to prove that she wrote the damn book? Don't that sound very familiar to what we have to deal with today as Black people? I think it does. So let's go down and talk a little bit about Mr. William Wells Brown. He was born in 1814. He escaped from slavery, became a prominent abolitionist, and he is the first Black person to publish a novel. His novel Clotilde, or The President's Daughter, was published in London in 1853. Believe it or not, you still can find Clotilde. I've seen it frequently on Amazon and different places like that. And then while we're going down the historical route, we got to talk about Frederick Douglass. We got to talk about his famous narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, an American slave. It became a bestseller, and today it still is a very pivotal piece of American literature. Now, from there, historically, we go to the Harlem Renaissance and the rise of Black publishers. We're talking about the 20th century here. So the earliest 20th century, the Harlem Renaissance pretty much changed everything, because before then, most of the Black talent, people that were writing, were still published by white-owned presses. But the Harlem Renaissance changed all that. So our famous artists of that era, like Zora Neale Hurston, Langston Hughes, Countee Cullen, they became literary icons despite having to deal with the fuck shit of segregation and the very much exploitive publishing industry. Then things changed a little bit in the 1950s because Mr. Charles F. Harrison became the first Black editor in trade book publishing at Doubleday. And because of him, that started to open more doors for Black writers. And then from there, we move on to the Black arts movement and the rise of the independent presses in the mid to late 20th century. So the Black arts movement kind of took place in about the 1960s and the 1970s, because black people got tired of dealing with all the fuck shit and jumping through all those fucking hoops to try to get published. So, a couple of things happened. Third World Press was founded in 1967 by Haki R. Madhubidi. It became one of the most significant black owned presses, and it actually published Gwendolyn Brooks and Sonia Sanchez. I know y'all know who Gwendolyn Brooks is. We all grew up learning about her in school. Another black owned press that came out during that time in about 1965 was Broadside Press. It was established by Dudley Randall. It also gave a voice, many black poets. And then one that may be more familiar to us that are a little bit younger, like myself, Amistad. It was founded in 1986 by the same Charles F. Harrison who became the first black editor at Doubleday. And so from there, we go on to the 21st century to our literary black titans like Toni Morrison and Maya Angelou and Alice Walker and Octavia Butler. So many great artists were able to come through and share their works with us because of the history and the things we've already gone through. So now that I've given you just a little bit of context and a little bit of history, of black folks in publishing, I want to give you a little bit about my own background and how I kind of got on this path as to even wanting to, be in publishing. So growing up, I was a blurred. I was a black nerd. I was always in my room reading, listening to music on my boombox. I loved researching and learning all things Disney. Like I said, real nerd girl stuff. So, at this point, maybe it was a touch of hubris that had me thinking that I could, be a writer. But I had almost a perfect score on the writing portion of the SAT. And if y'all are from Florida, y'all remember FCAT. I got a perfect score on the writing portion of FCAT my senior year. Literally got awards for that shit and everything. So I'm like, maybe I can, really write. You know what I'm saying? So I wrote my first novel. And y'all, it was terrible. When I tell you it was terrible, it was terrible. It was basically a fan fiction of me writing myself meeting and falling in love with one of my favorite singers. Yeah, but I didn't stop. I kept writing. And this time I started to write General Hospital and The Bold and the Beautiful fan fiction. Now, those fan fictions I shared with a select group of ladies, and they loved it. So, it kind of was a nice boost for me to keep going with my writing. So, in about, 2012, I read a young adult Greek mythology retelling about Hades and Persephone. And I loved it. I've always been a big fan of Greek mythology. But the wheels in my head kind of started to turn, and I was like, what it would be like if I wrote, something like this, like an adult novel. And from that spark, I wrote my first novel, Goddess of Legend. But it just doesn't stop there with writing a book. Let me talk to you a little bit about the publishing avenues. There are a few different ways you can go. There is the self-publishing route. That's where you're responsible for every aspect of your novel, from the cover, editing, formatting, marketing, making it available to sell. Everything is on you unless you hire someone to do those things for you, which I do in my current process for my self-publishing of my novels. Then you have the option to, if you want to look for a small press that will publish your physical book or just your ebook. With those, you typically get a higher percentage of royalties and you're not responsible for paying an editor, cover artist, formatting, any of that. The downside is you are less likely to see your novel in stores. Then Another option. There are the unicorn independent publishers out there that will accept your novel without an agent, and you have the opportunity to both receive a modest advance and a chance to possibly have your book in the stores. The last avenue you can pursue is getting an agent. And if you get an agent, they'll be able to pitch your book to large publishing houses. You may have heard of places like Simon and Schuster, William and Morrow, etc. Many of these large publishers will only look at your work if it comes from an agent. These are the publishers that a lot of the time they pay you the larger advances, and they also have the greater ability to have your books on shelves and retailers everywhere. You also get the opportunity for publicity and marketing, which we're going to get into that later. The trade-off with that is that your agent gets a percentage of your advance and royalties, and you will make less in royalties. So those are, the avenues I had to consider when I finished Goddess of Legend. Now, it has always been my dream to walk into a bookstore and see my book on the shelves. So I started submitting to agents. And I'm just going to keep it a buck with y'all. I did not receive any interest in my first novel from agents. And that shit really fucked with me. One thing about me, I'm going to keep it a buck. I submitted to a lot of them. And I either didn't get any response or just something generic. So from there, I was like, okay, let's see what it do. So then I decided to look into smaller presses. And I found one who liked my novel and agreed to publish it. Evernight Publishing gave me my contract for Goddess of Legend. It was for ebook, and if I sold a certain number of books, then it would be for print on demand. I was incredibly excited. Now, it wasn't walking into Barnes and Nobles or Books A Million and seeing it there, but I knew it was going to be on Amazon, Smashwords back then, Walmart, and other places for online purchase. Not to mention whatever royalties I made were only split between me and the publisher. So we all good so far? Now, let me tell you about the fuck shit when it came to creating my cover. It's where I got my first little brush with racism in publishing. As part of cover creation, they send you a sheet and you fill out what you want, from how the character looks to any imagery you want in the background. Now, I made it crystal clear that my heroine was black. I even gave them an example that she was supposed to remind you of Sally Richardson Whitfield, from Low Down Dirty Shame. Y'all, please tell me why they sent me back the first draft of the cover and the girl on it was white with white hair and icy blue eyes. Now, to say I was pissed was an understatement. This was a publishing company. People couldn't read? Or was it simply because I was challenging the status quo and the default of whiteness? I had a feeling it was the latter. And so I quickly reminded them again that my main character was supposed to be black and referred them again to the character sheet I had provided. Now, my character art was quickly changed to what I requested, and we continued the rest of the process without any real issues. October 13th, 2013 is when Goddess of Legend was finally published. It made a couple of top 100 lists on Amazon, like urban fantasy and African American fantasy. I was ecstatic. Again, no, it wasn't New York Times bestseller list, but the royalties were pretty decent. And I'd accomplished part of my dream. And to this day, Goddess of Legend is still my best-selling solo novel. It will always hold a special place in my heart. But I wasn't satisfied with where I was then. I still had dreams of seeing my name in lights and my books on the shelf somewhere. So I kept working and I kept writing, and I wrote a sequel to Goddess of Legend and another book at the same time. Now, how it typically works is if you are writing a sequel, your initial publisher has the rights of refusal. First rights of refusal. So what that means is that you have to submit your book to them first to see if they want it before you submit it to anywhere else. If they say, nah, we don't really want this, then you're good to submit it to somebody else. So I was busy writing my sequel and submitting another novel I'd written to agents. Now, it was starting to look like I was going to have another string of denials from agents, and then I finally got a hit. An agent requested to read the first 25 pages of my novel. I was getting excited, so I sent the first 25 pages. Then they requested the next 50 pages. And then they requested to read the entire novel. Now, this is a big deal because typically when people ask for samples of your work, they ask for you to send them a query letter. Sometimes they only want the first 10 pages. So the fact that she wanted 50 pages and then wanted to read the entire novel, that was a big deal. A big deal. Because a lot of the times, you don't even get that far. So I was waiting on pins and needles to find out if it was finally going to happen for me. And while I had all of this going on, I submitted my sequel to Goddess of Legend. My first publisher accepted it. But in the beginning of January of the following year, the agent extended an offer to represent me. I cannot even begin to describe how happy I was. Like, damn. This was major. And even then, I really had no idea just how big it was, especially for me being a Black, period. So I signed with my agent in early 2014. Now, let's look at some statistics because y'all know I like numbers. When I signed with my agent in 2014, only around 5.9% of Black authors had an agent. You want to guess what that number is now in 2025? Just guess. It's the same. Yes, it's the fucking same 11 years later. So you really want me to sit up here and believe that in over a decade, with all the talented Black writers out there, we're still in the exact same spot? I call bullshit. Let's call a spade a spade. It's racism. Plain and simple. But you know, at that time, I had no idea that things were so bad when I signed with my agent. Like, honestly, I was just basking in the excitement of it all, so I didn't pay much attention to anything else. Fast forward a little bit later, and my agent and I are working through edits for the book she wants to submit to the publishers. And I'm also working on edits for my second book in my Demigod Daughter series, which is going to be published, scheduled to be published in October 2014. Y'all, the first book my agent shop didn't sell. Again, I'm just going to keep it a buck with y'all. I'm not going to come on here and lie and pretend I'm this and I'm that and I'm not. I'm just going to keep it honest what my experience has been. So we either got ghosted with that book, we got the generic response that it wasn't a good fit, or they were scaling down paranormal and fantasy romance at that time. But racism, whether it's in your face or whether it's covert, is always lurking. So let's get into some of the reasons why it is so hard to not only get an agent, but even to break into traditional publishing to begin with once you have the said agent. So, like pretty much everywhere else, there is a lack of diversity in publishing, as well as systemic biases. I mean, as Black Americans, foundational Black Americans, that should just be something that we just know and accept at this point. So, we're going to go with some more statistics because, again, y'all know I like numbers. In high-level areas in the publishing industry, there was a study that was done in like 2023 by Lee and Low Books. Over 72.5% of the U.S. publishing staff is white. Yeah, white. So when it comes to getting a deal with a major publisher, how it works is your agent submits your book to an acquiring editor. The editor may really like your book, but then they have to go and present it to what's called an acquisitions board. The acquisitions board is basically the gatekeepers who decide if they're going to acquire your book. Now, they look at a variety of things, such as marketability. Are there any competing books coming out similar to yours? And then it comes down to money and how much they think they can make off of your book. Now, these gatekeepers present the first problem because if all you have is a room full of white folks, They lack the cultural awareness to understand things that are uniquely part of the Black experience. And they also can't see the value in our work because they only see everything through the white gaze. And because they can't not see themselves at the center of everything, some of them automatically think our books are not as good as something written by somebody white. Even if it's a white person writing our damn experience. Can I get a hello, somebody? And since there is nobody Black at the table in a position of authority to fight for us, many times our dreams of getting published get shot down right there. Now, not only there, something else we have to combat is being pigeonholed. A lot of the time, if editors are going to acquire a book from Black authors, the only thing they want us to write about is race, trauma, and struggle. Y'all know Black suffering is an aphrodisiac to some of them. They get off on it. I mean, look at the state of this damn country. Even a blind man can see that shit. So if you're not writing an issue book or what they think a Black book should be, welcome to another door slammed in your face. And don't get me fucking started on publishing's version of the one drop rule. Let me give you an example. If I wrote a Black space fantasy and they already had a Black author that wrote a pirate fantasy, my book will be rejected because they already have their one Black author to meet their quota. And that Black person is writing fantasy. Never mind the fact that it's two completely different types and you can have more than one Black author. I mean, white authors are never told there are too many white authors, so their book can't be acquired. Now, I know by now y'all are like, ain't this some shit? But hold up. It gets worse. It gets worse. So the next thing they do that goes hand in hand with the pigeonholing is the dreaded niche market. What this means is if you make it past acquisitions and they actually acquire your book, there is a misconception that because it's written by a Black author, it's only going to appeal to Black people. Despite the fact that Black women read more than any other group of people. 92% for the win again. But because some people don't want to recognize our power, per usual, Black authors are offered lower advances compared to their white counterparts. So not only do they fuck you there, but when it comes to marketing and promotion, as a Black author, yours is minuscule or non-existent. After all, I mean, they don't think you're bankable, so they're not going to spend any more money on you than they have to. And a lot of the time, without this marketing or support, it automatically sets your novel up for low sales, which affects your future in the industry. Because if your sales are low, then it gives them an excuse not to give you another deal in the future or an even lower advance if they do give you another deal. Online, I see so many Black authors that pay out of their own pockets for swag items, for giveaways, for publicity, and even travel expenses to go to these book conferences. And everything I'm sharing with you, all you have to do is go on Instagram or Threads and follow any Black traditionally published author, and many of them openly share their stories. Now, going back to my own publishing journey. So after my agent didn't sell my first book, the agent asked me had I written anything else. By that time, I was finishing up an older woman, younger man mafia romance. The agent pitched it to different publishing houses, just like with the first book. And again, it was starting to look like it was going to go the same route as the first novel when my agent finally got a hit with a smaller publisher, Sumha Publishing. The editor was interested in my book, so I'm waiting on pens and needles once again until finally they want to acquire my novel as well as another one. I was happy. It was another milestone. I got to experience seeing my name in Publishers Weekly announcing my deal. However, this deal, there were no advances, only a percentage of royalties, of which my agent got 15%. So I'm working on edits for both of these books, trying to get some kind of buzz going. But again, my novels weren't going to be in Barnes and Nobles or Books a Million. I wasn't going to walk in and see them there. That was still a dream I had yet to accomplish. So, with all of this going on, I was having discussions with my agent about, what I should write next and how I should plan out my career. And I will never forget this. So, my agent told me that I was a very talented writer, but they thought if I hid the fact that I was black and wrote under a pseudonym, it would further my career and give me better opportunities. And y'all, when I'm gonna tell y'all the way that shit depressed me so bad, I mean, it took the wind out of my sails. Like, damn, you were supposed to be my advocate. You were supposed to be the person who gets me into rooms I can't get myself into. But instead, you want me to hide the fact that I'm black because you think it would be easier to sell me. So also, around that time, one of my good friends, who was a very successful self-published author, came to me and she was like, let's write something together. Now, we had been talking about this for a minute, but with that fuck shit advice from my agent, excuse me, I was rethinking everything. So I told my friend yes. I mean, she was doing me a massive favor because her fan base was huge and supremely dedicated, and it will only help me get exposure. Now, when I told my agent was like, my friend needed to agree to have her represent her for this project too. And my friend was like, hell no. I mean, she didn't need an agent to help her do a fuck thing. She was already making damn good money on her own. So, I made a really hard decision. I told my agent I wanted to sever our relationship. Now, at this point in time, my agent really hadn't done much for my career. I mean, the publisher for my next two books was one that I could have submitted to on my own without an agent if we keep it a buck. Again, I'm keeping it 100. Now, don't get me wrong. I was fucking terrified. I mean, I had managed to land an agent when so many people couldn't get one. But having a bad agent is worse than having no agent. So, I severed that relationship. I also embarked on writing a 3-book series with my friend that has been very successful and introduced me to new readers. During all of this, my last book with the publisher came out. I was writing on another novel. And then in 2017, the publisher, Sumhan, that my agent got me a deal with, went bankrupt and closed its doors. Yes, it did. So now I'm having to figure out, well, what the hell is going to happen to my books? That was the start of my foray into self-publishing. I got the rights back to my novels, and my friend designed new covers and reformatted the books, and I put them back up as independently published. So from there, I started to shop around the fantasy romance I had written to agents. Ultimately, again, I got a lot of the same responses I had received the first time I saw an agent. And then I decided, well, hell, let me just self-publish it. I'm not giving up on my dream here now. I was determined to keep going. So I kept writing and I kept submitting to agents. During that time, I ended up writing and self-publishing 2 more novels. One of them came really close to getting me another agent, but the reason they ultimately passed, even though they loved it, was they didn't think they could sell it during the market. So, where am I now in my author journey? Well, I'm waiting on edits for what will be my first self-published young adult contemporary fantasy that is inspired by Black spiritual practices, past lives, soulmates, and Black girl magic. In addition to that, I am working on draft 2 of a super secret project that could be very life-changing for me and that I can't say anything else about. So, Now that I have spilled my guts and told y'all every last little bit of my business, let's rewind back to 2020 and a little bit more evidence that publishing is racist. So, y'all remember the heyday of Twitter back in 2020 when it used to be really good before, that Musgrave took it over. Black Twitter was unmatched. Like, it really was. It was a time. I followed a lot of Black authors, and the conversations were frequently around how high the advances were for white authors compared to Black authors. L.L. McKinney, she's a Black author that writes young adult fiction as well as graphic novels. She ended up starting this grassroots movement, Publishing Paid Me. And it got started because Black writers really wanted to have numbers to compare to their white counterparts just to see how much they were vastly being underpaid. And y'all believe it or not, authors started sharing their information. In fact, a Google document was started that had around 2,500 entries. And when I tell y'all, watching the numbers come in infuriated me because the disparities were so great. So let me give you a couple of examples. N.K. Jemisin is a Black award-winning, multi-award-winning, might I add, science fiction author. She's won Hugo Awards for her Broken Earth trilogy. She only received an advance of $25,000 per book. Now, winning a Hugo is a big deal. In contrast, a white author, Lydia Kiesling, she revealed that she received a $200,000 advance for her debut literary novel. And then Chip Cheek, who is also white, received an $800,000 advance for his. Now, y'all, I don't even know who either of them two people is. I know who N.K. Jemisin is. I don't know who Lydia and Chip is. And I consider myself to be pretty well read. But for fuck's sakes, this kind of money for a debut? A debut? Did y'all hear me when I said them numbers? Rewind it back. $200,000 and $800,000. Meanwhile, you got another Black author, Jasmine Ward, who is a 2-time National Book Award winner, that tweeted that she had to wrestle her way to get $100,000 advance for a new book, even after the books that she's already written have won major writing awards. Now, if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a damn duck. And racism is the only way to explain such a major discrepancy. Because of how bad the racism and discrepancy is with the advances and even getting a fair account of how our books sell, there's not even a list I could find that could tell me who is the highest selling Black author of all time. Y'all know the very problematic J.K. Rowling is easily touted as the best-selling author of all time and the first billionaire author. Nothing out there for Black folks. No list to tell us who's made the most money. It's because, for one, they know they are giving us the fucking short end of the stick. And two, they don't want any evidence of it put together so they can see how they're really doing us wrong. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm getting a little bit heated every time I think about this. Now, let's talk about something else we have to deal with as Black folks. Let's talk about book bans. Now, of course, like everything else, we're disproportionately affected by the book bans across the United States. Now, and this is according to PEN America and the American Library Association. October 5th through 11th is Banned Books Week. And that's where we try to bring visibility to books that have been banned. Now, a substantial number of the banned books, of course, address things like race, racism, Black history, and the Black experience, as well as, y'all know, they are attacking LGBTQ+. Now, George M. Johnson's memoir, All Boys Aren't Blue, which is about his life as a young Black queer man, is one of the most frequently banned books in the country. But it's not just him. I'll tell you a few on the list that might surprise you, and some you won't be surprised by. Toni Morrison, The Bluest Eye, and Beloved. Banned book list. Maya Angelou, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. Banned book list. Alice Walker, The Color Purple. Banned book list. Angie Thomas's The Hate You Give. Banned book list. Stamped, Racism, Anti-Racism, and You by Ibram X. Kendi and Jason Reynolds. Banned book list. The 1619 Project by Nicole Hannah-Jones. Banned book list. So, besides the fact that they don't want LGBTQ plus representation, another reason they use to ban Black books is because our books are considered divisive and they promote critical race theory, or they'll make students feel guilty or uncomfortable about American history. To that I say, if you did it, you did it. Own up to it. You should feel uncomfortable. Hell, you should feel guilty. There's a saying that white people take credit for everything but the racism they perpetuate and continue to benefit from. Another reason our books are on the ban list is because our books challenge the status quo and the white narrative, and it's a threat to the political agenda of people like MAGA and the far right. I mean, they can't have us learning that we weren't all enslaved. They can't have us knowing just how many inventions we created. They can't have us learning that we were kings and queens and the first people on the planet. No, that's a threat. Books highlighting those facts have to be banned so the masses can't be educated that white is not the end all be all. Now, the last reason they like to ban Black books is because they say our books are too explicit or too vulgar. That's the excuse they use for attacking Toni Morrison and Maya Angelou. So, being real and authentic is considered vulgar. But people writing books about having sex with dinosaurs and freaky ass shit like that isn't. Make it make sense, y'all. Make it make sense. So, I know I've dumped a lot of information on you, but if you're curious, there are some genres where we do have the most presence and where we tend to do pretty well. So let's talk about some of those. The first shouldn't be a surprise to any of us. It's literary fiction. It's the things that explores our identity, race, and our culture that have been pivotal in shaping American literature. So that's like our Toni Morrison and our Zora Neale Hurston, Ralph Ellison, James Baldwin, and contemporary writers like Jasmine Ward and Colston Whitehead. Another one is urban fiction or street lit. Now, y'all know these books usually are very gritty. They're very realistic of how life is in urban settings. Sometimes people even say they're dope boy novels. But whatever you want to call them, they have a very large and devoted readership. Publishers and bookstores even have dedicated sections for these books because they make a lot of money and they're very popular. So think about Ashley and Jaquel J, Ashley Antoinette as examples of people that write in that category. Another one is memoirs and nonfiction. So that can include anything from slavery narratives by Frederick Douglass, Harriet Jacobs, to W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington in like past eras. And then now memoirs that are massively successful during our time, like those by my forever First Lady Michelle Obama, Trevor Noah, and our real president, Kamala Harris, in her 107 days that is currently topping the charts. Mwah, love you, Kamala. Another area where we tend to do pretty well is romance. This is my genre. I love to write romance. Black women authors like Talia Hibbert, Jasmine, Kennedy Ryan are just a few of the mainstream names in adult contemporary romance. And then For the young adult romantic fantasy, you gotta mention Tracy Deonn, Brittany Lewis, JL, just to name a few. There is a plethora of subgenres and age categories inside the romance genre. So it's one of the reasons that Black authors are starting to have some type of mainstream success. And then the last one is called speculative fiction. And this encompasses sci-fi, fantasy, Afrofuturism. Now, like everything else, this genre has been dominated by white people, but there are some Black voices that are shaking the foundations and carving their own space. Examples are the pioneer, Octavia E. Butler, and contemporary authors like N.K. Jemisin, who I've already mentioned, and Tome Adeyemi. Now, again, I know I have thrown a lot at you guys in this podcast, and you may be curious as, what can we do? I mean, there are ways that we all can support Black authors and make change. To address some of the systemic racism, we got to attack the problem from all angles. Now, there are some areas that we as everyday people have no control over if we're not in the publishing industry. But that doesn't mean we are powerless, y'all. This year, we have already seen how we can affect change once we put our minds to it. So if any of the things I have shared with you have resonated with you and you want to do something to support Black authors, there are some things you can do. 1, buy books by Black authors. And if you can, pre-order or purchase these during the first week, because it counts toward first week sales and it gives them a shot at hitting lists like the New York Times bestsellers, USA Today, or independent booksellers list. And it also helps send a message to the publishing industry that people want to read books by Black authors. 2, read and review their books on places like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and especially on Goodreads. Goodreads is the breeding grounds where trolls like to go and 1-star books by Black authors before they even come out to tank their ratings. And they do this shit purposely all the time. 3, request their books at your local library. Y'all know a library card is free. And then if enough people ask for the book that you've requested, libraries will purchase the books. That also helps the author and it counts towards their sales, and it also helps create more word of mouth because now the book is stocked in the library and more people that may not have heard of that author have a chance to check that book out and read it. And it's going to encourage readers to, hey, well, let me go check and see what else is in this author's catalog. 4, if you can, purchase books from Black-owned bookstores. Some of the popular ones are the Lit Bar in New York, Semicolon Bookstore and Gallery in Chicago, and Mahogany Books in Washington, D.C. A lot of Black authors like to have stops there when they're doing their touring and promoting their book, and all these Black-owned bookstores ship across the country. And then number 5, engage with the authors on social media. Share their posts. Comment how much you enjoy their books. Word of mouth is a powerful selling tool, and it also builds community and visibility. I mean, y'all don't know how many times I have second guessed myself in my own writing journey, and then I'll get a random message from someone or a random comment telling me how much they enjoyed a certain book and when was I going to write the sequel to it. No matter what stage of the writing game you are, those moments really lift you up and they give you, the courage to keep going sometimes when it feels like doors are constantly being slammed in your face. So, this is the end of episode 2 of Everything Erin, Publishing is Racist. If you have any questions or there's anything else I can expound upon, feel free to reach out to me. And as always, my books are available on Amazon. Erin Ashley Tanner is the name. And I appreciate your support. And if you enjoyed this episode, please let me know. And please come again to the next one.